All right. What an awesome day today is. I am so extremely, I'm just going to be real frank, I'm geeked out. I'm like totally excited right now because some of my most favorite people, not the only favorite people, but some of my most favorite people um, walking planet Earth are on this stage right now, and we're getting ready to have a great conversation about family ministry and family life. Um, and before we do, I want to get a little introductions going on here and just kind of have a little get to know you moment for everyone. First of all, two of the most powerful influences in my life are sitting right over here to my right, and to have the two of them together in a conversation to be able to talk about the things that weigh on our heart and the things that weigh on your heart, how you can help us and how we can help you to win this next generation for Jesus is inspiring and it's empowering at the same time. And it is such an honor. I want to just say that it's such an absolute honor to not only to get to do ministry life with these people on the stage, but for them to be able to pour into us and teach us and to educate us and to point the way and clear the path for us and to giving us the direction that we need to go in, and so that we can do it in not only in our way that we do it, but with the wisdom and the guidance that we're not out here on our own. And so I am so excited to have on the stage with us today Reggie Joyner. He is he is one of the most powerful voices, a mentor to us, to me, to countless of many of people, people that he doesn't even know, that he mentors, that he pours into their life. He is the creator of Orange, which is the strategy that our church has adopted for our content that we use to guide us through student life, through ministry life. And it has literally changed and revolutionized our church, our life, our families. I know from the very first time I ever read any material, I ever looked into what Orange was, and I ever heard his voice, something in me just jumped. It made my baby jump. I had the audacity to be in my 30s and say I was retiring from children's ministry.
Wow.
Wrong. And it was just something that you birthed through Orange and through your messaging and through your ministry that made me fall in love with my purpose all over again.
Wow.
And that was powerful for me. And it has changed so many of our lives. And we are so forever indebted to you and grateful to you for the work that you have done and are going to continue to do. And so we thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thanks for letting me be here. It's a great church, and you guys have been a great model to show a lot of churches, what it means to make kids a priority. So thank you.
Yeah. And we also have my mom, Pastor Sheryl Brady, who is such a blessing. I mean, it just goes beyond words, the power that you have of influence and the way you use it, not just in a powerful way, but you use it in an empowering way. And I know that your heart's desire is to set us up to win.
Yeah.
And that your heart's desire is to like we talked about earlier, to educate us and to pour into us and to give us everything that we can to help us not be distracted by the things that could easily distract us in ministry and as parents from time to time, but to stay focused on keeping the main thing the main thing. And so I am so honored to be able to have you here and to be in this discussion. I'm honored to be here. Yes. Thank you for letting me be here. And then right over here, we have two of the most passionate, powerful people working in student ministry and children's ministry today. We have Couture Boston, who is the director for children's ministry at the Potter's House, North Dallas. Yay. And we have Phil Galindo, who is the director of student ministry at the Potter's House, North Dallas. And they are powerful. They are fired up. They are ready to go on and to run the race.
Yeah.
And we have endurance. We're ready to run the race, and we're ready for the baton. we're ready to have the baton passed on to us. And we're honored and we're grateful. And like I said before, we want to make you proud, but we want to do everything in our heart that God's called us to do.
Yes.
And we want to win the next generation, and we want to do our part. And so we're going to just have a little discussion about family ministry. We're going to have a discussion about parenting, and we're just going to have fun.
Come on,
good.
Y'all ready?
Look forward to it, yeah.
All right, so this first question is kind of directed to both of you. So whoever wants to answer and pick it up and chime in. Our first question is, in a day when it is so easy to forsake the gathering of the saints between the busyness of life and the convenience of streaming and on demand, let's unpack why it's so important for church leaders and volunteers that we cannot come off the wall. Like Nehemiah said, I have a great work to do. And it is so important that not only do we recognize the work and what is the why behind the work, but the fact that we cannot come off the wall.
Right.
Want to talk about that for a little bit, maybe, Reggie?
I'd be glad to. I think you guys are absolutely a demonstration of that. And I think the way I would encourage you and the way you've actually modeled it is with Sheryl and you, Lana, you've decided to make the next generation a priority, not simply in word, not simply by saying, oh, it's important, because a lot of churches say that, but how you've budgeted, how you've hired staff, how you've put people of excellence in the roles to lead.
Yeah.
Because when you take, somebody like these guys and you put them on the wall to say, hey, make a statement about the work that needs to be done for kids and teenagers, you're making a statement to everybody else in this congregation that this really does matter.
Yeah.
And Kadura and, Phil, I've met with them, I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with them. They're educators. They have degrees. They are smart. They have done their work. They have done their job. And I think part of the problem in our generation is we don't realize as churches and as church leaders, and this is what you've modeled, and I'd love for you to speak into this, that it's not just about the big room. It's not just about people showing up here on Sunday morning, but it's about engaging them to do the work of the ministry. And if we only think about the people that are in this room, we don't think about the people in the small rooms around this room, then we're not setting up the church for the future.
Right.
And that has to start from the top.
Yeah.
That has to start with leaders like you. And to say in this day and age, hey, the assembling of ourselves together is important, but it's also important not because of what you show up to listen to, but what you show up to actually do in the lives of kids and teenagers, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I think I am the product. When I was coming up in church, children's church was sitting on the pew next to my mother, just going through her purse and just doing anything I could do to just not be bored. And the emphasis was never put on raising the next generation. It was never put on teaching us, empowering us, preparing us. And so, it was like if babies cried, you take them out.
Sure.
But there was no real education piece, maybe a Sunday school class or something like that. And so I was, as you were talking, my mind just went back to churches that I grew up in. And I'm thinking, where are they?
Wow.
And that's kind of sad.
Yep.
But, a lot of the people have died out and went on to their reward and went on to be with the Lord. But they haven't left that footprint. They didn't build the church of tomorrow. And I'm just grateful for the ministries that have poured into my life and were able to salvage somebody that could have fell through the cracks, And that's kind of what concerns me, Lana, about people that are streaming. A lot of times, parents will stream. I'm going to get my word from the Lord, and they're going to pull up to the stream, and they're going to, receive. But where are their children?
Yep.
They're in the bedrooms, they're playing games, they're doing whatever. And I'm just saying, maybe even a parent can, you can be blessed by streaming. But I'm concerned about your kids because my kids were raised to be in the house of God, and we wanted them to experience the presence of God because that's what makes it real. And I'm concerned about that whole the whole generation, Reggie. That's
Yep.
that it's not even tuning in.
Well, the thing about it, about the relationship with God that we forget is that when you look at the scriptures, it was the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of David. So the God that they understood was a God that was connected to a person. And if we don't connect children to people, to actual people in relationships, they'll never know how big God really is, because they need to understand, you know, the God of Lana, the God of Keturah, the God of Phil,
so good.
the God of, you know, John and Mary and whoever the leaders are, because that's really the key. God designed us for relationships. And it's an interesting piece of research. Research indicates that churches around the country are shrinking and aging, and that, you know, online services are great in pockets where people can't get to a church. But what they're discovering when they do really the better research is that the only place where the church isn't shrinking and aging is where churches have made children and teenagers a priority in their ministry.
Wow.
And so, you know, if you're a parent, you know, you want to make sure that you're connecting your kids to other adults so they can get a version of faith that's not just your faith, but it's bigger than your faith, because they're going to need a version of faith that will equip them and help them when they step out into the real world in a way that I think they only get from having a consistent leader in their life.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very important part of our strategy.
That is amazing. That's good. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He was a generational God.
Yep.
I mean, I think the young people in the scripture, they knew who to worship because they watched their fathers worship.
Right.
You know, but if we don't see our fathers and our parents worship, then we don't know. And I've always said, before you leave this earth, make sure you tell your children who to worship.
That's right. That's
Because
good.
you can't take it for granted.
Yep.
That they'll just know.
And that's Moses standing in front of the people going, there's one God,
Yeah.
to reorient everybody to, hey, this is the issue. And when I meet people like Phil and Keturah, I'm say that right? Keturah. I want to make sure I get that right. Keturah.
You are, thank you.
Okay. I think that churches don't realize until they put people in positions like this, and we go back to the wall, don't come down off the wall, and they're working on the front lines for kids and teenagers. It really is sending a message to everyone else who's watching, every adult in your church, every staff member in your church, that children's ministry matters, student ministry matters. This isn't babysitting.
Yeah.
This is discipleship.
Right.
This is getting a kid to own their own faith before they walk away. This is prioritizing, you know, our ministry to say the future of the church matters. And these kids really aren't even the future of the church. They're the church now.
Yeah.
It's just that the church won't have a future if they don't stay connected and engaged with what God has designed them to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And us as millennials, we are very goal-oriented. And there are people that may be listening today that are on the wall, but they're struggling to stay on the wall. Can you speak into their lives and why it's so important? What are some of the things that maybe practically that you guys do to make sure that you stay on the wall? Because it's so easy to give up when you're not seeing what you want to see when you want to see it.
If we go back to the story of Nehemiah, we know that Nehemiah was rebuilding the walls because the people of God were in disgrace. There was evil outside the gates. There was a generation actually who was at risk of losing their faith, losing their lives. I mean, there was so much at stake. And so Nehemiah, you know, rallied the greatest volunteer movement we've ever seen, you know, to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. But the interesting thing about the story, when you get to the point where the walls are almost finished, he's actually on the walls himself.
Yeah.
He's on the walls doing the work, which, I mean, you know, you look at the CEO of the building project, I mean, he could have very easily been doing all kinds of other things. But that's the point where Sanballat, the enemy, really begins to panic because he believes they're going to finish this. They're going to actually get this done for the sake of a generation. And so, you know, Sanballat sends a message to say, hey, why don't you come down off the wall and let's have a conversation? It's so interesting that Nehemiah doesn't take the bait. And I think, you know, from the Nehemiah perspective, I think there are 3 or 4 things he understood. One is I think he understood that as long as he was on the wall, he was having a firsthand experience with what mattered. And personally for him, it was keeping him in tune and focused and not distracted about what matters. And I think sometimes we need to all ask ourselves the question as leaders, what are we doing to personally remind us that there's a mission, that we've got to stay engaged in this?
Absolutely.
And the second thing I think Nehemiah happened in his world was as long as he was on the wall, he was surrounded by people who were on the wall. So he was with people who inspired him.
Yeah.
You know, because they saw him, he saw them. And I think sometimes I would say to leaders who are tired or discouraged or, you know, wondering, does this matter? One of the most important things you can do is get with other people who do what you do. Get with other people who get this. Your inspiration as a leader is not somebody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility. So how are you going to invite other people into your life to stay inspired? And I think sometimes we just forget that who we hang out with, who we do life with as leaders can ultimately affect us.
That's why your Orange Conference is so important. We have been sending our crew to your conference for several years now. And when they come back, they are like swinging from the rafters.
We're ninjas.
They are.
That's great.
So, I mean, I would just say, too, if there's a pastor, a leader that's listening today, let me tell you something. It has been one of the greatest investments that we have made because, you know, if you think about it, the people that work with the children's ministry, they spend so much of their time there, and they're always giving out every week, and very rarely do they have a moment to get poured back into. That's how burnout happens.
I agree.
And it is your conference that has saved us from a whole lot of that.
Great.
And I want to be a pastor that says to you, thank you for inspiring those who inspire our children.
And it's reciprocal. I mean, when Lana shows up at conference, she's inspired, but when we meet with Lana, she inspires us. So that there's just a principle in place here.
Absolutely.
That we need each other as leaders to remind ourselves why we need to be on the wall doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the third thing and the last thing I would say about being on the wall and staying on the wall related to that is that as long as Nehemiah was on the wall, everybody else knew where Nehemiah was.
Yeah, that's right.
It was making a statement, like we said at the beginning of this, to everybody else that was watching. Nehemiah believes this is important.
Yeah.
Nehemiah thinks this matters. And if he had gotten off the wall, everyone would have seen him get off the wall. And sometimes as leaders, we don't understand the power of simply continuing to do what we do and the statement that makes to everybody else about why this is a priority.
And the Bible said that he's called us from men for men.
It's good.
And a lot of times people just forget that he's called us from men.
Yep.
But if we're going to minister to men, we have to understand that the way that we do that is by being among them.
That's good.
And so I hope we've answered your question. We probably took it in 1,000 different directions.
That was powerful. I have two things I want to say. Number one, I want to say in regards to the investment, Pastor, that you have made in us as leaders, I want to say, and servant leaders, I want to say thank you for us not having to beg for that investment. And I know that it is, it's not easy to make the investment, and sometimes you have to do it wisely, and you can't send 100 people all at one time.
No, but I sure wish we could.
But when you see that there is fruit, you recognize the fruit from that, and then you realize there's worth the investment.
And let me say something about this too, because I want to appreciate the way this needs to happen, because I think most leaders who wrestle with their ministry and the inspiration wish there was somebody at the top valuing this. And sometimes you have to champion from the grassroots, but when you have a pastor like this, you have someone who's saying, no, this matters, whatever we have to do for the sake of the next generation. And unfortunately, that's not always the story.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if a pastor's listening right now, my prayer would be bigger than Orange Conference and bigger than attending, anything like that with your staff or sending your staff, would be simply that you decide that this matters so much, you'll sit in a circle with them and have conversations with them, and you'll budget for this, and you'll recruit leaders for this, and you'll use your platform to leverage this, because this is a big deal. And until we shift those at the top to start thinking this way, the way you guys are doing this, I'm afraid that there's a generation of the wings, and churches will continue to shrink in age, and we're going to wake up one day. One denominational stat I read recently said that the average age of their denomination now is above 60. And then in the next 10 years, they will lose 50% of the attenders in their denomination simply because of the graying factor and the aging factor. So we're not really thinking in terms of what the church needs to look like in the next 10 years. It's going to take leaders like you to go, hey, this matters.
You know, it helps too, because I have the fruit of bringing children up in ministry that I look at every day. You know, I look at my children, and I think, and you know, I look back and I didn't have an orange, and I'm just like so grateful to God that they turned out as good as they did. Thank you, Jesus.
Well, let's not attach too much to orange. I'm not sure orange can be the result
But you
of
know,
every kid
but let me
turning
tell you
out.
something. Let me tell you this. You have given us content. You have, over the years, we have a lot of people who have a heart. They want to do it.
Sure.
But they can't beat that content out every
Sure.
week. And the fact that you have given people content, we say to God be the glory for that, because that is killer. You've given us killer content. I mean, from little kids all the way up to, if I wanted to reach in there and pull out a text, I could.
That's great.
And that's
good.
I don't want us to underestimate that, because I didn't have that. My kids, bless their heart, they lived on the road with us. They went to churches with us. They, you know, they seen church. They probably, maybe statistically, should be along burnout on the side of the road somewhere, because they've had enough church, you know, to last them. But for whatever reason, I'm grateful to God that they have had a heart to stay with the church, because the church is powerful. People like you, Reggie, people like you guys, are enabling the church to continue to be the most powerful force in the earth. So I want to thank all y'all.
Good. Well, this is fun.
Yep.
As we were talking earlier, in regards to parents, and parents have the most long-lasting, long-reaching influence into their child's life. And Reggie, I've often heard you talk about the difference between the time that the church gets to spend with the kids versus the time that the parents get to spend with the kids. And I think it's sad, but sometimes we get into a habit, and I'm going to be honest and say sometimes it's been me too, even working in ministry, that I've depended on the church to help teach my kids about Jesus and to help them to get to know the Word of God, it does a default to our kids. It does not do. It doesn't give the Word and the Lord over their life and their Heavenly Father justice to just depend or think it's one or the other's job.
Yeah.
Sure.
It isn't one or the other's job. It's the power of partnership together. Can you talk just for a minute, Reggie, about what those hours
throw
look
out
like?
some random thoughts. I mean, I feel like, years ago when we were wrestling with this, we actually added up how much time the average church or the average leader in the church would actually get with a student or a kid. And after we did the math, it was pretty convicting. I mean, it was about 40 hours in a given year. The kids who show up in your church on a consistent basis are going to show up, a lot of Sundays, but you get about 40 hours if you add it all up. When you take out blended family issues, when you take out sports or sick days, or, you add it all up. So that means you've got about 40 hours to help a kid understand what they need to know about God, Jesus, faith, grace, all the different issues. And at the same time, in a given year, the average family will have about 3,000 hours. So if you put that demonstration in front, which we do sometimes, we'll have a jar, of 40 marbles and several jars of 3,000, and you look at the visual difference. That's a lot of difference. Yeah. So we say to churches all the time, you can take 100% of your energy and just put it into the 40, but you'll never get more than what the 40 hours will give you.
Right. Yeah.
But if you could take about 10 or 15 or 20% of your energy and your resources and move it toward the 3,000, even if you only get a small percentage of parents to engage, you'll still raise your potential to influence a kid's life.
Wow.
Because you can outsource math, and you can outsource, baseball, and you can outsource a lot of, lessons in dancing and music. But faith is a different kind of thing. You can't outsource that.
Right.
Yeah.
And we think there is a partnership that should exist between the church and the family. And I love to talk about this partnership because on the one side, it means engaging the parents who are already present, who are coming to be a part of your strategy. How can you tap into them to continue the conversations that you start on Sunday? And Sunday is such a great catalyst for that. But the other part of it that I think we don't even tap into, we don't even talk about, represented in those 3,000 hours, are the percentage of parents whose kids may come or who are in your community and they don't even come to your church.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a generation of parents who really do care about the future of their kids. The thing that we've dropped the ball on is not connecting how the future of their children is related to faith. You know, we want to talk about Jesus and God, which we should, but we don't connect how Jesus and a relationship with God, the great commandment, what that looks like, really affects every other aspect of their life. And when we can connect those dots effectively, we set ourselves up in our communities to build a bridge back to parents who are disengaged. Because they need to know that we really do want to help them win. And they need to see, and that's up to us, how winning is related to faith and a relationship with God. But we've got to connect those dots. We like to say it this way all the time, and you alluded to this a while ago. It's not either or, it's both and. We use the color orange because the light of the church plus the heart of family, you know, two combined influences make a greater impact than just two separate influences. Bottom line is if we double team the kid, both with the church and the home, we set them up to have a better future.
Yeah, we have a disciple.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we do.
We have a disciple.
I'm going to turn to these guys
Yeah,
over
come
here.
on.
Yeah.
If that's
We need
okay
to
for
hear
a
from
minute. So from you all's perspective, you know, hands on the ground, boots on the ground, you guys are staying active. You're in the trenches with our kids, with our families. You hear the issues. I mean, you know, it's so true to say, you know, and because I have kids in elementary and in middle school, but it seems like nowadays, elementary is the new middle school, and middle school is the new high school. With the weight and the issues and the challenges that our kids are facing, the struggle is very real. And sometimes we don't, we hear our kids, but do we really hear them? And the things that they're facing and the challenges that they're dealing with. And so much of that comes out in a vulnerable moment in Sunday, because we often talk about how important it is that as parents that we widen the circle and that we give our kids safe places to talk to, and we point out, and some of those people are you guys and your team, and you hear the issues of their hearts. So from you all's perspective, what would you say if you could speak on behalf of your kids and say, what are the things that they need from us as church leaders and they need from us as parents? And I know that there is so much power in unity, and we don't leverage that opportunity to be unified enough. We really don't do it. We go and, you know, we go and we teach and we pour out everything we got to the kids, but when the parents come, we're not talking to the parents. Or when the parents come to pick up their kids, they get their kids and they're ready to go. Then they get in the car and they talk to so-and-so and so-and-so about the message today, and, you know, girl, that blessed me. You know, pastor was all up in my business today, you know, and they're talking these talks, but are they turning around in the back seat and asking their kids, what did you get out of today? They're not leveraging that time and that opportunity. And if you know, anybody out there's kids are like mine, we stay busy. I mean, we between basketball practices, baseball practices, then you got games, then you got tournaments, then you got church, then you got this and that and the other. So time is so rare and it's so precious, and we're not leveraging the opportunity enough for that. But I know that, you know, I've said it before, and my mama might not like it, but as kids, we don't tell our parents everything.
Yeah, I don't like
you know,
Sure.
she don't like it, but it's true. We don't tell our parents everything, and so you guys are a safe place for that. You've cultivated a culture and a team that has said it's safe to talk here. You know, this is your safe place, and if you need us, we'll be there for you. Knowing we're going to partner with your parent at the same time, but we're covering you, and this is a safe place. So what are some of the issues, you know, that are on their hearts and things that you would say that if you could speak for them, what do they need from us as leaders and parents? Couture?
That is an excellent question, and it's the question that I ask myself all the time. Am I actually meeting the need, or am I just showing up? Because I think there's a difference. If I wanted to learn more about law, I would ask a lawyer. I wouldn't ask my dentist about that.
Right.
And so when I want to know about leadership and am I leading well, and I want someone to use their lens against me, I'm going to talk to other leaders and say, I need you to pour into me. I need you to use that lens and show me where I'm missing it with my team. When I want to know how to meet kids where they are, I talk to kids. What is going on in your life that we need to be addressing? What's happening in school? What's going on with your friends? Do you have friends at school? Are you being bullied? Do you know the difference between conflict and actually being bullied? Someone who just doesn't want to be your friend and someone who's actually mistreating you. And having them unpack that conversation. Also, not being afraid to ask the question, are you a bully at school?